So, back for another episode of Conversations about Integrity. And I'm again excited to talk to my guest today, the lovely Marcela Widrig, and who sits in LA and I'm in Berlin. So I think it's the longest time difference that we have in these conversations. And Marcela, to those of you who don't know her, is an international teacher teaching around shame, boundaries, self-respect, and strength of women, the strength of women through the body. And she does so in like really internationally in Australia, the US, and Europe. And I met Marcela. I met you, I think, now I'm again with the dates a bit off. I think 2014 or 13 it was.
Yeah.
Doing training to teach through the body. And since then, actually, I got to know you better when you started coming to Denmark, and we had like kind of really nice conversations ever since. So I've been enjoying them. And I'm really curious to today to talk to you about this new subject, or maybe not new subject, because it's been also in a way in the air, I think, since we met even.
Yeah, for sure.
So the first question I always ask, and I have a few questions that I want to ask you, but I also am very happy to like really let it flow. And if you have questions or anything like that, it can be a conversation. So
okay,
anything you want. Before I dive in, anything you want to add or through the beginning?
Well, just to say hello. And if people want to know who I am more, they can go to my website.
Yes, we will put that.
Yeah, but you might put that at the end anyway. So that's it. Yeah.
Great. So the first question is, if you do have a concept of a sensation or anything around the subject of integrity, what does integrity mean for you in your life?
Well, I really access most questions through my body. So when I think of integrity, it means to me that there's no conflict inside of me. That whatever I see in a situation that might require choice, let's say, or action, or expression of some sort, that what I'm feeling inside is quite naturally and honestly expressed outside. So that there's no hidden agenda, there's no trying to please people, there's honesty. And I'll feel that, because if I'm not being honest, I know inside of me, because usually my stomach would be in knots, or my energy level drops, or I feel disconnected from others in some way.
Okay, so this makes my second question useless, which would be, how does it feel in your body when you feel integrity?
Well, I'm trying to think of an example.
Yes, lovely.
Yeah. Because sometimes, when we're acting out of integrity, it can appear really selfish to others. Right? Because you're not going along with the crowd, or you're not going along with what's expected of you. And so it can be a bit shocking to people. I'll give you a funny example also, because it happened in Germany. So maybe if people are listening to you from Germany. So I was in Hamburg, and I had just taught the Embodying Boundaries workshop, and I was very clear in my body at that point. And a friend of mine and I went to a small restaurant, and it was really crowded because there had been manifestations all day. protests.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of the aftermath. And so we found a table right away outside, which was sort of just a matter of timing. And we sat down, and it was a small table. At most, it could have easily fit 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
6 friends if you were, with a group of people, right? Yeah. And you were happy to be kind of shoulder to shoulder and legs over legs. But so this was a friend who I hadn't seen in a couple of years, and she's a year, and she's a friend from Bali. So it was a really nice meeting. And we sat down, and all of a sudden this woman appeared over our table with her burrito on her plate in hand, and she was honestly hovering it just above my head. And she said, can we join your table? And she had a group of 4 friends.
Mm-hmm.
And in my body, I very naturally felt no. I had just taught embodying boundaries. The boundary was so clear and it was so simple. And I had no quandary about it. I had no contradiction. Also because I'm not German. So I didn't have this socialistic idea that we should share the table.
Mm-hmm.
So I just very simply said, no. And I haven't seen my friend in a long time, and we really would like to have some private conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I felt the ripple effect of everything that I had done wrong according to the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my body, I was fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because also I know that if I had given in and said, okay, sure, it would have been against my wishes and against my will. And there were other places to sit. It's just that they wanted to sit at that table outside. And I could feel like, wow, that knot in my stomach that could have been there if I had said, okay, go ahead, and felt the pressure of, what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
That knot wasn't there. And I just sat there, and I saw how my friend actually really suffered, because she was sort of, she was in between the experience, right?
Mm-hmm. She wanted to invite the other person, and at the same time, she also didn't want to.
She didn't want to invite the other people. Mm-hmm. That would have been an acting against integrity, right? She actually didn't want them to.
Yeah.
But her society said she's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized I apparently there was a conversation behind me in German that she was translating. The people at the table next to me were extremely angry with me. And, again, had this been in America, I might have acted differently, because it's the pressure of your own society, right? Mm. But I didn't have that. But really did feel like, if I look at a simple example of integrity, right? Just simple. Mm-hmm. That I was acting. Now later I adapted. There were 2 other people that came and sat down, and I said, sure, because it was 2 people. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I checked my body. Is this okay? Or am I giving in, and then stomach in knots and sort of resentful for a silly thing, right? But this is what we do. But resentful, and then that resentment gets kind of communicated.
What you like, one thing is, okay, it can appear selfish to the people around you, or like the other thing that you're saying is that, in a way, staying with your integrity is daring to deal with the reaction of the other people, like standing with your need or your whole experience of that moment, like, and saying like, okay, this is the no and I need it now. And then standing with it, even though there is this ripple effect that you said, that both from behind you could feel, and probably from these 4 people around you as well.
Yes, the woman with the burrito on her plate really stood there. She was wanted to put that plate down on the table. She didn't leave from the first no. But yeah, and that can often happen too, right? We might either boldly or shyly choose according to our integrity and according to our will, let's say, and then we get a pushback, and depending on how clear you are, the next phase of holding your integrity is challenged, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like the next wave of it.
Mm-hmm. So
And
there
that
first
it can,
there's this impulse, and then there's like to
just
stand
to
there.
hold it,
Yeah.
and to have it be okay, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that can happen in connection with clients, with students, with partners, with friendships. You could call integrity, now that we're talking, is a really clear boundary that you hold. Not always, but that's one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
As we're opening it up.
Mm-hmm. And can you give an example as well of where, like, a moment when you notice, or a moment in your everyday life where you know that it's more challenging? Because this was an example of something where it's very clear for you and very easy in that sense, even though it was
Yeah.
also
Yes.
challenged by the others. But like, how would be a situation, or because I mean, I notice, like, in everyday life there are these little moments where it can be like, like you say,
Yeah.
almost with any relationship, or even, yeah. But so to know, or if you have an example of where for you
Yeah.
it is challenging in some way.
I've got a couple. I've got a professional one and I have a personal one. So professionally, when it's more general what I'll give you right now, but if I'm teaching a workshop, and say there are people, which there will always be, who appear disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they are or not, you really don't always know unless you have a direct conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
But they can appear disengaged. And I can feel my tendency, and it will come about in like more effort in my body
Mm-hmm.
to try to get them more engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It might be to try to make sure that they're agreeing with me or that they like me somehow, right? I need like a little sign. It might just be like a nod of the head or a smile, or that they write something down in their journal. It's really silly little moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can then I can feel it, because I'll start to sort of contract my diaphragm, and my chest gets a little bit pushed forward, and I'm pretty sure that my voice will get a bit more constrained. I feel it right now because I'm kind of doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I think about what I'm doing in the room, is I'm making that person more important than anybody else in the room. And I might have, let's say, out of a class of 15 students, let's say 2 aren't as engaged, but the other 13 are. It's actually not in integrity to give more importance to those 2 students.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I'm checking a lot, because I do know how I do it in my body, how I'm trying to, if I simplify it, it's that I'm trying to please, or I'm trying to persuade,
Mm-hmm.
and then
And they
that,
get their approval or something like that of yours.
yeah,
Or,
and then that means that I'm not actually just giving their free will, it's complete space. Right? Because you have a right to agree or disagree with me all the time.
mm.
Now,
Yay.
sometimes in a class, right? But in a class, sometimes if somebody wants to disagree and it's taking it away from the actual context of the workshop, then I won't give it space in a direct relationship when they've brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm giving those 2 people in the class who are maybe a little bit sleepy, or they look bored, or they're not writing anything down, or whatever it is, I'm giving them more attention in order to please my own ego and my own self. That's messy. That's dangerous, and it's unfair, really.
Mm.
So that would be the professional example. The personal example is that quite recently we moved my mom off to, we moved her into a residential housing for elderly people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two other siblings, and we've really been kind of partners in this whole thing, you know, who's responsible for what area. And for the most part, it's worked very well. But something got kind of messed up with the timing at the end. And so my mom's up in her new state, but she's not in the house yet. Now, I got back from a trip recently, and I really wanted to be back in Los Angeles before I started traveling again. My guilt said I should fly up to where she is and spend 4 or 5 days with her.
Mm-hmm.
That feels absolutely contrary to my will and to what I wish for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been on the road a lot. I've basically been on the road for about 6 weeks, and I really have about a month before I go traveling again. And so I feel it, and I feel that it's really not marked by what I want to do as much as it is by guilt.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, what if, like, how, because clearly your guilt and your want, they're both part of you, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so how do you think about or integrate that, like when you think about integrity, that there are different aspects or different parts or wishes we have or needs we have that might contradict, and which one to give
Wins?
into, or yeah, which one wins, or which one gets expressed or in
Yeah.
our actions, or and how is that in regard
Yeah,
to
it's such a
also.
good question, because I can say that this situation with my mom, it's not 100% resolved, because I just got back into town yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to look at flights, and I just felt my whole body sinking, like, oh God, I do not want to get on another airplane right now. But there's also two wants, and there's two wants in the guilt, right? So there's the want that I have just to be on my own and land a bit, see
Mm-hmm.
friends, have my life in Los Angeles. And there's the want for her to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I define that want more clearly now as we're talking, that I can show in a lot of different ways, as opposed to flying up there and being next to her.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to get to that want.
Mm-hmm. So it's looking in a way actually behind the guilt, no? Like it's
Yeah.
like the guilt is a kind of disguise or shield
Well, the guilt feels
or
thick and heavy, and I feel like a victim when I'm feeling guilty,
mm-hmm.
because I feel as though I'm being forced to do something I don't want to do.
Mm.
Now,
And in this, it sounds also like as if the guilt only has one option. You have to
yeah,
go fly up there.
right. And that's for sure when I'm stuck in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's also another option, right? I could decide, you know what? I think that for now, like, I could do it even through reasoning and going through my mind and making excuses. And um, for now, I want to go and I want to be with her. So I'm going to forego the time at home, and I'm going to go be with her. If I make that choice, in order to have it become something that holds integrity, I have to stop being a victim of it,
Mm-hmm.
to feel that it's a clear choice. So I might even make a choice out of guilt,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
once I've made the choice, the recognition that it was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way, I'm not holding it against anybody. I'm not reducing my energy because I'm, you know, silently angry at the situation or whatever. Then it just becomes the next thing that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have this is actually a kind of a rhetorical question with you, because I know I already know that you do have, but what, like, I will ask it this way anyway. Do you have a kind of practice to move into integrity if there is something where you are, like, either where you noticed afterwards, damn, I did something that I regret, or where I feel like something was off, or I don't know, maybe you never end there anymore. Or when you are in this state of having to make a decision and having these different directions that are pulling, or that options that might not be compatible at the moment.
In the smallest ways, yeah, and I do it fairly quickly. You know, if I know that I'm belaboring a point, I'm overthinking it, I'm going, well, I don't know what to do, and da 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 da. At a certain point, I just know that I need to stop, and I need to look at what's getting in the way. How am I holding this in my body? And depending on how big the question is, it might just be a very simple, like if I'm resisting in my ribs and I feel something sort of thick and heavy, I might just settle for a bit, breathe, soften it, and go back to, well, what is it that I want and what's getting in the way? But I really often go back to the feeling in my body, something that's unresolved. If it's something, though, that sometimes, you know, those things that you realize after the fact because you don't feel well, right? So if I look at this last trip to Europe, which was a phenomenal trip, however, I exhausted myself. And in exhausting myself, and there were a number of things, you know, I can look back and I can be very practical about it. And I can say, okay, well, I need to less clients, more time to rest in between, potentially organize the structure of the travel differently. You know, there's a lot of really practical things. But I was left with a feeling inside of myself that I didn't give my best in certain scenarios because of my tiredness. That didn't feel good at all. And I actually, when I got to, I think my last location in Ireland, it was really quite thick. And I was kind of mixed with tiredness, but I recognized it as shame. Like I was ashamed that I hadn't given my best, according to my story, according to my mind, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't like to be exhausted when I'm working. And all I could do was work with the shame. And then in working with the shame, and I did it through movement and I did it through body embodiment exercises, right? I just went to, how am I holding on to this shame and the story? Like, how am I shaping myself around this story? And then using the practices that I teach to open up the shame. So it has nothing to do with rationalizing what happened. You know, I actually had to feel the shame that was connected to some sort of grief, that if you had a conversation with a friend about this, that there would be a lot of, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Of course you're tired. Of course this, of course that. But that's not good enough for me, really, for my process and for the way that I approach things. Nor do I feel that it would hold any integrity if I'm going to teach the subjects that I teach. Right? Because then it means I have to pretend. So I can't, obviously, if I look back and I think, you know, was there somebody that in truth I didn't give enough time to, or enough attention to, or enough energy towards, then I would call them and I would write them and I would say, look, I feel like I missed this point. Can we address it? There really wasn't that when I look back, at least that I'm aware of. You know, we can only be aware of what we are aware of. But there, in the future, that's all I can do, is I can say, okay, well, those mistakes were made in the past. Now in the future, what do I need to do to make sure that I don't repeat them?
Mm. So there's an aspect of kind of closing what happened and allowing the feelings that are around that, and then there's an aspect of making it practical in a way for like, okay, so how not to end there again. And so there's a kind of, in a way, using this to learn also, to learn how, like, and I think, I don't know, I come more and more to this conclusion that in a way integrity, it's always challenged by either, because we do new things, so of course we don't know yet how it will feel all the time, or the world does new things, so we have to relate to new things. So this aiming at integrity can in a way be an intention and can be something we continuously learn about, no?
Yeah, because if you're expanding yourself in whatever direction, whether it's with a relationship or a study, a personal study, or work, whatever, if there's expansion, you're going to meet things you haven't met yet. And they're designed to make you question yourself in some respects. Not question yourself in terms of doubt, but go, oh, wow, I always took this position. And if I expand into this new territory, maybe that position isn't necessarily always right. Maybe it served me up until this point, but now there's questions. And so when the subject of ethics, being ethical, was really something that I started to look at as a question, what I was faced with was how much my ethics had been shaped by outside structures, right? Like by culture and society and religion. And it's so much about, are you being good or are you being bad? Right? That was how 15 years ago or longer, how I would have talked to you about ethics. So if we get back to what we were saying before, every time you step into a new arena and it stretches your boundaries and it stretches what you know, there can be a lot of questions. And so if I hold the subject of ethics as questions, and is my choice coming from a place of personal wish and how I want to interact with this situation? Or am I saying no before I've even explored it? Am I hardening to hold my ground? Am I applying, this is another one that I've encountered a lot lately from students, is this idea of being an open-minded person that comes from an idea of how this looks versus how does this feel in your body? And because a lot of times, say with the subject of sex is the one that I've most recently encountered with a lot of clients, and the subject of being polyamorous or having an open relationship. And for some, that could be, if you apply religion to that, that could be immediately bad, wrong. You're not supposed to do that, right? Without thought. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there can be this idea that it's good because it's open-minded, and you should accept all, and anything is possible. And so in some respects, it's boundaryless. I don't think that is for everybody, right? And so bodies, you need to actually explore it for your own body and see. So a lot of times I've had people say, yeah, I think the subject, and I can even tell in the voice, in the way they're talking, because it becomes kind of disembodied. Yeah, this is a good idea. If you connect it back to the body, there's a more clear choice. Right? Like, yes, this I want, or I want it, but I'm frightened. So how do I, because it's an unknown territory, or clearly, no, this isn't for me. And then if this isn't for me, further conversations, say if it's with a partner, have to take place, or further choice has to take place. And that's just one subject area, which I think is a pretty relevant one for people.
And this adds something new in a way to the conversation, because you added this, okay, in the morals, like before, in the beginning, having this moral sense of right and wrong or good or bad, in a way, it sounds almost like it would be, if it's right for me, it's right for everyone, or if it's right for everyone, it's also right for me. And then integrity would somehow have to do with that. But actually, in the way you're describing it now, the broader version is like integrity can be, for me, this is really a no, like I really don't want this, but I have no objection against someone else maybe feeling totally fine with this. Like now,
Yeah.
there might be some situations, yeah, I don't know where that isn't the case, but probably most things in life. And now I don't want, like, because I know this also from myself, like I know this from myself, that this open-mindedness at some point in my life, it was actually limiting, like this idea of open-mindedness, like this, I should be open to this because I don't have this restrictive thinking. I have, like, there's options, and you can do things, and da 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 da.
Yeah.
And then realizing at some point, like, no, like, yes, I can see that that this exists in the world, and it's fine that it exists, but it's not what I want or what I need.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next question is, well, how do you measure that, right? So that it's not just a rational thought process. How do you connect that to your body? Because here's the thing, you could be stretching your boundary in a way that's actually going to be full of growth, and you'll meet a period of fear and unknown. You could also be meeting a boundary with that same feeling of fear and unknown, but that because ultimately that's not a boundary you want to cross. Right? So there's that edge that's really tricky of exploration.
Yeah.
And also the willingness to try something perhaps just on the other side of that edge, and then realize that it weakens you, so that you take a step back. But it doesn't then become wrong. It just becomes, that's not something that allows me to really a full, whole, strong person in this world. Choice by choice.
This, yeah. So it's actually, in a way, that's very nice to, I think, open up this option, like to try something out, even though you're not sure if it will be for me or not. And then even when you choose not, okay, I tried this, not for me. And I don't have to now take the shame hat and be like, oh my God, I should never, I knew it before, it wasn't going to be like, blah, 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 this whole conversation. But I can be like, oh, really clear in, this is not for me right now.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to, exactly, the shame hat is a perfect metaphor, right? Because like, why do we have to wear the shame hat as opposed to just like, oh, that didn't feel good in my body. Okay, I'm going to let that whole icky feeling move through my body, and then on the other side of that, I'll be clearer.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to this, like, I'm going to wear the shamehat and go, I did something bad, therefore I am bad. There's no reason for that. It's not, in the subject that you're working with about integrity and ethics, I look at it as a subject that is so full of our possibility to grow as human beings constantly, as opposed to what we often do of kind of shaming ourselves or criticizing ourselves or others. Because we think that they're doing something wrong. You know, I can say living in Bali was a real experience, because a whole different set of ethics runs their lives. Completely different set of ethics. Their connection to right and wrong is different. Their connection to life and death is different. Their connection to money is different. They have no qualms about kind of taking a tourist, right, for money, with no shame whatsoever. Whereas our society would maybe do it, but feel shameful about it, unless you're sociopathic. But that was a tricky thing for me to recognize, that where they were going to feel shame was very different than where I would feel shame as a Westerner. Which shows you also how much society is determining these things, and culture is determining these things. Yeah. So, you know, to strip away those layers is a never-ending process, right? And then getting back to it and checking if it works for you. Do you have more options? Do you feel free? Are you sleeping at night? You know, are you able to connect with people eye to eye and not look at the ground? There's a lot of ways to check it that have nothing to do with the constant questioning that might happen in the mind.
Yeah. This is a nice transition to, I like to end with the question of, if you have some kind of practice or tool or resource that you would like to share with people listening, for them to try out in a moment, that can either be about like restoring integrity or coming back to that, or anywhere in the realm of this conversation, that they could experiment with.
I can do that. What I would offer is this. I would say, if there's an issue that you can't quite let go of in your mind, that somehow you're justifying yourself, but at the same time you're criticizing yourself. Whether at the end of the day, and I think that doing this at the end of a day can actually be a nice practice, because then you undo it. So I'm going to call it moments where you are questioning what you did during the day. And that somehow you're dancing between beating yourself up or justifying yourself, right? Which neither one is going to get you anywhere. So I would say, first, just recognize that that's happening, and sit somewhere where you've got a little bit of time and a little bit of space. And this can take 10 minutes. It doesn't have to take more than that. Identify 2 places in your body where it's unwell. It's contracted, it's thick, it's heavy, something that you can clearly access. And then for 2 minutes, contract a little bit more, so that you get to know a little bit more this stuckness. Now, the rest of your body may follow, but I would say focus on 2 areas. Like, it might be the area of your diaphragm, which I've mentioned quite a bit, and the area, like how you're holding your shoulders. And just learn it a little bit, and learn when you're contracting it, you might really become so much more familiar with this in-between place that doesn't get you anywhere, this stuck place. After 2 minutes, and I usually put a timer when I'm doing this, I just also put a timer for 2 minutes to really open those areas and to breathe and to let go. I do this 3 times in a row. I'll do 2 minutes emphasizing, 2 minutes letting go, 2 minutes emphasizing, letting go, emphasizing, letting go. Because what I find by doing the repetition and also really sticking to the letting go part, right? So not indulging in the punishment. Right? really like, no, I'm going to let go. I'm going to breathe to the area that I'm contracting, and I'm going to soften, and I'm going to let go of everything that I've believed until this point. It's a discipline, yeah. Mm-hmm. That what I find is that by doing it 3 times in a row, there's a real depth that you get to, and you might get to the some old guilt that was wrapped around the situation. You might get to a boundary or a no that you didn't say that you wanted to say. You may meet some shame that's there, and you may see, wait a minute, there was something that was unclear, and I pretended that it was clear. Mm-hmm. And so I actually now have to go have a conversation, right? So by doing it, and then just, write down if there's an action that needs to be taken. Sometimes there is, but not always. And then the third part of the third contracting and letting go, really give 3 more minutes just to breathe and open to your rib cage, diaphragm, because it's an area that we so often contract around when we doubt ourselves. Mm-hmm. Not only, but it's a pretty key area, and it's usually involved. So just by breathing there and I mean, you do all kinds of breathing exercises. So I would recommend that they go to your Facebook page and they follow your breathing exercises. And then the last part of that is see if there's an act that needs to be taken, or see if there's something that you want, that you are still unsure of how to express it. So that can become an area of personal practice of learning the expression of your want, which is a muscle of integrity that just simply needs to be exercised.
Mm. Yes, I love it. I'm really touching somehow this. Thank you for sharing so generously.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Both now the exercise, but also generally the whole conversation. I really enjoyed it. For anyone who wants to have more of your teaching, they can find it on fierceembodiment.com. Mm-hmm. And I want to mention that you are offering a retreat in Mallorca in April next year, and other treats and goodies will come up in January, I think, when you're traveling back to Europe in sometime next year.
Yeah.
And there are probably some workshops and things not in Europe, but somewhere else also.
In Australia right now, but I really did. It was wipe out a whole slew of workshops recently.
Yeah. Great. Good. So thank you for now.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.